I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Sam.
And this is Progression in Progress. All right, welcome back to another episode of Progression in Progress. How you doing today, Sam?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Doing well. This is only our third try doing the intro. And so far, it's gone a lot better than the other two. So I think we're off to a good start.
Progression in progress, baby.
There you go. There you go. Okay. So today, let's just jump right into it. Today, we're doing an interview with my friend Cullen Darius. Me and my friend Cullen go way back. You know, I think became friends freshman year or sophomore year of high school. We did class council together. And then we were in the worst math class of all time together, junior year. And then senior year, we did an advanced film class together. And just, you know, now we're both at different colleges, but we've kind of stayed connected, sharing our creative endeavors and just talking as friends. And I've really enjoyed getting to know him over the years. And I'm super happy that we're still connected. And I'm super excited that we get to bring him here into the podcast today because he's got, you know, this guy's a creative genius. I wish you guys could see some of the stuff he's written. He really does have a talent when it comes to writing and just a creative mind in general. So this is the third episode that we're doing about kind of getting to know or figuring out what you want to do for the rest of your life. Like in the first episode, Sam and I kind of talked about where we're at with that subject. We discussed what we want to do for the rest of our lives, you know, the directions we're leaning and also where we're not confident. And then the next episode, you know, we interviewed my cousin, Ethan Watson, and got his perspective and his computer science degree and his computer science job and kind of how he made college work for him. And he dropped some knowledge on us. And then today we're hopping into the interview with my friend Cullen and kind of getting his perspective because he's really passionate about what he does. So I'm super excited to hear his perspective and see what he has to say about the subject. All right, Cullen, welcome to the podcast. How you doing?
I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I was just recording the intro, telling Sam and telling the audience, how we got to know each other like freshman, sophomore year, high school. And then we had the worst math class of all time together, junior year.
With the bird woman.
Dude, that was tough, bro.
Yeah.
No, I got no animosity, hindsight 2020, but during that class, bro, that was rough.
I'm trying to take that same mindset moving forward, but I do have some animosity and I will not let go of it.
Yeah, that was a tough class. And then we took an advanced film class together our senior year, Warrior TV. We produced the school's broadcast and worked on a bunch of other stuff.
I mean, that was next level. I think young Spielberg doesn't even begin to describe what we worked on.
Dude, yeah, it was that class. I'm looking back on it, looking back on all these high school classes, that's definitely one of the classes I remember the most. We learned a lot about film. There's some good drama involved. And I think we just had a lot of fun overall.
Yeah. I mean, especially like that was one of the first classes where you're really given, free roam to just do your own creative process. I think that was a huge, huge first step for a lot of us.
True. I think free range, free roam is understated for that class. I think it's 100%. It's the Wild West. It's the Wild West in that class.
Totally agree.
Yeah. Well, so we wanted to bring you into the podcast today because we've kind of been doing a little mini series, a series within a series. We've got the podcast, but we decided to do a few episodes themed together, all about figuring out what you wanted to do with your life. So Sam and I had a conversation about what we want to do for the rest of our lives, what we're thinking about that, where we're at. And then we decided, because the conclusion was we have some ideas, but we're not 100% confident. So we wanted to interview a few other people who have a little more of an idea of what they want to do.
Okay. Yeah. Emphasis on a little more of an idea, but
yeah. So hopefully that you fit the description. I personally think you fit the description. Hopefully you feel like you fit the description. So I guess the first question, just to kind of preface it, I feel like, getting to know you over the years, I feel like you've the word I would describe your interests is multifaceted almost. I feel like you have had a lot of interests in a lot of different things. When we talk personally, we can talk about a bunch of different things. I feel like you've been involved in a decent amount of extracurricular activities, but not recently, but just for, I don't know how long it's been this for you, but from my outside perspective, just since you kind of took that senior year class with me, that advanced film class, you've kind of focused in your interests. You've narrowed things down to entertainment and storytelling. So I'd love to hear your whole perspective on how you kind of narrowed things down to where you've landed today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny actually with classes starting, I've been giving the same introduction for about 50 times to different classrooms. So yeah, for me, you're exactly right about that. I think entertainment and especially the writing and storytelling side of it is something that I have pretty much always been interested in. It's always been kind of on the periphery, I think would be a better word for it, until very recently. But I got my start writing when I was a lot younger. I used to make just like little storybooks with my friends. We would shoot short scripts, rubber band gun videos or Nerf gun wars, stuff like that. But I always got a really good sense of enjoyment out of, making a story come to life and, telling something that, we wrote more or less coming from our own heads and then ending up on a screen as a physical interpretation of, what we have written, what we've come up with. So I've just always been interested in that. I did throughout middle school and high school. Actually, I wrote a series of history documentaries for, this was just like a local history competition. I don't know if anyone knows, National History Day was what it was called. And I wrote a series of scripts for those, some documentaries about periods of history. And I loved that process, sitting down and fleshing out a story and making sure it had the cohesive points, beginning, middle, conclusion, all that kind of stuff. I just absolutely loved it. Fast forwarding actually to then the end of high school that Jonathan was just talking about, Warrior TV was, I think, the first time that I was really able to sit down and write a script from beginning to end, and work with a team of creative people that were going to, greenlight that process, make it possible for that script to kind of make it to production, make it all the way to the final screen. And then from then, I've really enjoyed it. I think moving into college, I'm a screenwriting major now at a film school in Los Angeles. So I'm really, trying to put into work those things that I've learned, that appreciation for your creativity and the storytelling process. I'm really trying to, turn that now into a career every way I can.
That's sweet. I think that's one thing that's cool. One thing that I've been kind of thinking about is how our passions or our interests come from some random moments, not random moments, but rather smaller, I don't know how to describe it. It's almost like, so you said, you filmed some videos with your friends when you were younger, when you were in your childhood. And then also you decided to participate in this National History Day. And then that was kind of like the beginning, the birth of your interests in writing and storytelling. And now you've ended up here, right? I think it's cool how just these little details end up influencing us in some giant big way.
Yeah, no, it really is the small things I found. Even though you're working 100%. On a video with you, we made that one, was it Brad Night? Where it's just like a stupid dance promotion video. And it was maybe the dumbest thing we've ever made. But just that process of sitting down at a table, like bouncing ideas back and forth and then spitting out a screenplay after an hour, just something about that really, stuck with me.
Yeah, dude, Brad Night. That was pretty fun. Dang. Well, I guess just as a follow-up question, so I guess that's cool to hear the backstory. I always love talking to people who I feel like I know really well, and then hearing them tell their own version of the story, and then you learn so many new things. So I think that's pretty cool. But I guess one thing that I've admired from a distance is how passionate you are about this, how you can talk about it forever. You can talk about it for hours. Like, for example, you remember when we went to lunch at the beginning of the summer or middle of summer, and then our great friend Blueberry showed up, right? You remember that?
How could I forget?
Of course. So, right. So we're just sitting there having a conversation, and then Blueberry pulls up, right? And then you guys just start going at it, talking about, storytelling and entertainment. And you just the amount of detail you were able to recall, and the amount, I could just tell how interested you were in talking about it. So like how do you take something that you're interested in, because there's a bunch of people who have interests, but not everyone is passionate about something. So how did you take your interest, or how did you take your interest and turn that into a passion, or where just in general does that passion come from?
Yeah. So I think, the interest lies from the very beginning, the first time you ever see a movie and that kind of sticks with you. I know a lot of people say they have like a love for cinema or a love for the movies. And I think that's absolutely the case. The first time you go into a theater, and I'm trying to remember, I don't even remember what the first movie I ever saw was, but I have vivid memories of going into a movie theater and seeing, something like Hugo, or, the first time when I sat down and watched The Force Awakens and saw like a big blockbuster reveal on the screen. I think every little moment like that kind of adds up in your head. And you get to this point of going, that's what I want to do. I think for me specifically, I'm very much into, I'll use the word themed entertainment, kind of creating a physical landscape, a lot like theme parks, Universal, Disneyland, all that kind of stuff. And so I think, like seeing those physical interpretations in front of you, seeing the work that everyone has put before you, and being able to put your finger on it and say, this is something I'm interested in. This is what I want to do. And then I guess for me, it's just a matter of having the time and I guess having the determination, I think, to put the time into those things. Because when I see those, I know that's for a fact what I want to do with my life.
So you're kind of talking about, themed entertainment there. With your major, you're majoring in screenplay.
Yes.
Are you kind of trying to actually kind of go into making themed entertainment eventually, or you're more focused in doing movies and then have that kind of branch out into that eventually?
Yeah, I think, either path would be great. I'm not going to pretend to be an expert here because, we're still learning the whole process. But I think definitely branching out. I'm in the middle right now of drafting a feature screenplay, and I'm working with a small group of writers to put that all together. But eventually would love to transition into, a more themed environment, physical stories, attractions, stuff like that.
While you're making a screenplay, then, is there anything do you kind of have that kind of in the back of your mind? Okay, I really need to how do you flesh out your story, and how do you really make things come to life in a way that in the future that could become a form of themed entertainment? Or is that even on your mind while making that?
Oh, 100%. I think I had a professor once tell me, and I'll never forget this line. He said, "You're never going to be able to sell a movie, especially an animated one, if it doesn't at least have a sequel, and you can't make a ride out of it." And he told me if those two things, if you don't meet those two criteria, you won't be able to sell a screenplay.
Dude, that actually when you think about it, every Disney movie ever created, I feel like it fits it fits that criteria.
Oh, yeah. 100%. When you look at something and you can go, oh, I can see that being, a room and a ride. That's probably why it was written.
Well, dude, I love that you say that, because just last night, I watched The Princess and the Frog at a friend's house. Right. Yes. And I had seen that movie a while ago, but I think when it came out, I saw it, but this is the first time I'd seen it in a few years. And now that, watching it and then kind of having my impression about rewatching it. And then what you just said, it's totally a whole themed world. It's it really brings you into the world. So I think that's a cool comment.
Well, and it's funny, I'll add in a little bit to that. Just in more contemporary news, Disney has just announced that they are going to change Splash Mountain into The Princess and the Frog.
Oh, really?
It's
okay.
This was a few weeks ago now they announced this. It's at both of the U.S. parks. But it's interesting now because, I have a bunch of friends who are all really into Disney stuff. And so when we go back and watch Princess and the Frog now, we're able to start pointing out, I think that's going to be part of the ride. Or this part of the story has a perfect arc that would fit in with, a part of the ride or something that we would be able to see play out physically in front of us. And I think that mindset, I've tried to bring it into everything I've been doing. If I can't come up with a way to make it relate to a wide group of people, and I use a wide group of people as a stand-in for, families, older people, younger children. If everybody can't relate, then to me, at least, the story is not complete.
Very interesting. One thing that I've been thinking about lately is how I like that perspective, because that's almost the opposite of what I've been thinking lately, is that, you got to find your audience and you got to make things specific and kind of just speak to them. But that's a unique perspective, hearing the opposite side of that you need to be able to kind of include everybody in your story. And I guess that makes perfect sense, because a story really should be able to touch everyone. That's what great stories touch everyone. I feel like if you have a great story, it's going to find a way to prick everyone's heart. It might not be in the same way, but I think that's really cool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, having a universal appeal is something that I'm striving for at the moment. And I think it's something that, great storytellers have a great grasp on doing this. And I'm trying to get to that level now, of making a story that, universally appeals, and maybe not in the same way to everybody, but everybody has some sort of connection to.
Dang. Well, okay. One thing that I think I think this is really cool right. So this is progression and progress. We're talking about your passion. Right. We're talking about progression in general, moving forward in life. But for the last, 5, 6, 7 minutes, we've been talking about, writing and storytelling. I feel like you have successfully managed to suck us in to the whole world. You have you've told a story about writing a story, and we got sucked in. Mm-hmm. And so I think that right there is just a testament to your passion towards storytelling and entertainment, is that somehow on a podcast about, kind of self-improvement and taking control of your life and improving yourself, we've been talking about stories for the last little bit. So I think that's a real cool testament and a real cool indicator of real life indicator of your passion for this. So that's pretty sweet. Thank you for bringing that to the podcast.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I've been listening to a bunch of your guys' work. I actually love listening to this in my idle time. But I really appreciate the progression and progress mindset of, moving forward to become what you're not yet. And I think I like to contextualize everything I'm doing just in terms of a story. Because, if I can always think in a story, then I can always try to find the next beat or, the next part of what's going on. And so always striving to become something you're not, kind of moves you along. It's like the metaphorical plot line. And I think that is something that is great to achieve.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way of kind of looking at life and, kind of moving forward that way. Like, what is the next thing I need to do? Like, if I'm looking back, 10, 20 years in the future, how do I want to look at this time in my life in terms of like a story, and just kind of moving on from there? How do you kind of maybe kind of going back to writing, when you're making kind of a story like that, how do you like kind of decide like what is the next best step for characters or next plot points that overall can make that story kind of engaging to everyone, or kind of developing that general appeal to everyone? Like, how do you kind of plan things like that?
So I think, I could give you the whole long technical answer, which is just a lot of, structuring and storyboarding and, just kind of working things out back and forth. But really what it comes down to is that there is an end destination. A lot of times when you're writing a story, you have that in mind, especially, with a feature length thing, you kind of know where you're heading. But the part that's up for debate is really how you get there. And so, any number of things can happen. We have low points for our characters. We have highs. We have all kinds of, crazy experiences, people they're meeting, conflicts they get into. And I think something that's pretty important to recognize, at least in context of the story, is that no matter what happens along the way, you always got to get where you're going. And so whatever steps your character has to take, or whatever, loopholes or roadblocks you got to throw up to keep them from getting to that goal, in the end, they're going to have to get there, or else the movie won't end. And so, I think that's a pretty interesting way to look at it in terms of just structuring or bringing that story together, is that you always have to keep moving forward, because if you stop moving forward, the plot stops. And so just structuring wise, you got to make sure that everything you're doing is kind of leading up to that end point, keep building, so that when you finally do reach it, you've got a really successful and rewarding payoff.
Well, dang. Well, while you and Sam were talking, I was kind of just crafting this whole vision, this idea in my head, and how progression and progress, how life really is a story. Just like you and Sam were talking about, life is a story. And one thing that Sam and I talked about in one of the earliest episodes, I forget exactly which one, but one thing that I learned recently from a friend in San Diego, he talked about great stories and how each nation has their own story. That might be an oversimplification, but a lot of times you can kind of identify a story within a nation. I think that's how he explained it to me. And the example he gave me is, okay, in Great Britain, their story is one of nobility.
Yeah.
Right. No, I mean, I don't want to sound like a stupid foreigner, right? But that's how I've understood it, right? Their story is one of nobility. In their culture, nobility is very important. I guess you can still look and see all the family drama going on with nobility and stuff, and how they choose to focus on that, but that's still part of their culture. But then here in the United States, and most of our listeners, except for, okay, funny side note, I was looking at where people were listening to the podcast, and we got a few random people listening in Finland and Germany.
All right.
so for the 99% of you who are in the United States, in the United States, the story is the underdog story. The United States is an underdog nation. That's the origin story of the United States. And I feel like that is still the story we value today. A lot of times, maybe less and less as time progresses, but I still feel like there's a lot of people who value that underdog story. And when you think about it, your whole life is a story, and you are the main character of your story, and you are the underdog of the story, and you have to progress through life. You have to, so, you got Cullen over here creating roadblocks for you and loopholes and writing in things to the script that you weren't expecting. But that doesn't mean you like Cullen said, you still got to get to that end goal. You still got to keep progressing. You still got to keep moving forward, and you still have to have to progress. I mean, just to connect storytelling to progression and progress.
I know, absolutely.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you know, a movie or it's a dark ride attraction, you know, if you're sitting down at a movie theater, you're sitting down on the Matterhorn, you're always got to get to the end. You're always telling a story, and everything we're doing is getting us to that point. And I was listening to a lecture the other day, and the person that was lecturing said, we as storytellers only do one thing. He said, we try to figure out the most creative way to knock somebody down or kill them. That's all we do. And he said, no matter how hard we try, that person has got to get to the end. So I really think that goes back to what you were just saying, that, you know, we value that story and it kind of drives us towards where we're going.
Yep. Dang. Well, I guess, yeah, it's just your life is a story. And, you know, you got life, you know, you got people writing the script, you know, you're getting dealt deck of cards from these LA film students trying to kill you, right? Knocking you down. But really, from the progression and progress side, is you just got to keep moving forward. You have to keep moving towards that end destination, just like Cullen's saying. That's the ultimate goal, right? You know, in the progression and progress mindset, I don't know if there's really I don't know if we advocate for a singular moment that is the end goal, but rather constant progression. But I still think it fits into this little picture we're painting, that you just have to continually, constantly progressing, and you can't let these obstacles knock you down, take you out. Because one, that doesn't make a good story. But two, I think that's that just doesn't seem like a great way to live your life, to just get knocked down and not complete your own story, not be the own hero of your own story.
Yeah. I mean, when you hit your sequence 5, act 2 low point, you got to get back up, because act 3 is coming. And if you're laying on the ground, you're not going to be able to finish your movie.
So true. Dang. Well, just to finish things up, we always love to ask people if they have any closing advice, any closing thoughts, anything that they just want to share with our audience.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I guess I've not to say that I've overcome adversity, but it has been a process to get to the point that I'm at now, just in terms of getting into a film school and, you know, convincing the people around me that that's actually a viable career for some reason. I think no matter what you set out to do, you're meant to be doing it. And so if you think that it's the right thing for your life or for your story, then it is the right thing for your story. And you got to just go that route and don't let anyone hold you back or stop you from doing that.
All right. Write your own story. I feel like that's the theme for today. We learned a lot about storytelling. We got sucked into Cullen's universe. And then I feel like what I'm taking away from this conversation is you got to be the hero and you got to write your own story. And you can write your own story. You know, it's not some people, in real life, there's not someone out to get you, trying to destroy you, take you out. Right. But
for the most part.
There could be, yeah.
Maybe not at all. I feel like that's not going to age well. It's not going to age well. But you know, you are the hero of your own story. You can take control, and you can, in reality, you can take control of your own story, and you can write your own story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, awesome. Well, Cullen, thanks for coming here into the podcast.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thanks for having me.
I always love talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Great talking to you guys.
All right. Peace out. All right. That was a tremendously great interview.
Yeah. Love talking with him.
It was cool. I think I just loved how we got wrapped up in his whole world. He was able to, as a storyteller, drag us into his world about storytelling. I think that was great. I think that was good.
I could just listen to him talk about that for hours. Honestly, I could just tell he was so passionate about it.
That's something that I admire. That's really the biggest thing. That's why I wanted to have him on the show, as I just admired. Well, one, he's a great friend. He's been a great friend to me. I've learned a lot from him, and I think he is really creative. But the biggest reason I wanted to bring him into the podcast is because his passion is just so visible. It's so visible. Like that little lunch I talked about, you know, we went to lunch and then we ran into a mutual friend and they just started talking about entertainment and storytelling for like 45 minutes, you know, and I could just see the passion that he has. And that's why I wanted to bring him into the show.
Definitely. And it shows.
So Sam and I just wanted to kind of wrap things up. I love doing this little post-interview conversation because it kind of helps me finalize my thoughts and finalize my takeaways. And Sam and I kind of had just 2 quick takeaways that we wanted to share. The first one being, is kind of something I've been thinking about, and that I talked about. I was just featured on a podcast called Adamantium Antics with my friend Adam, and he interviewed me. And in that podcast, one thing we talked about is, you know, finding I think we talked a little bit about finding what you're passionate about, just a little bit. The subject, it was a different subject, but one of the things we talked about opportunities. And a lot of times, one thing that I talked about was opportunities most of the time, they aren't these giant grand things that fall out of the sky onto your lap. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is my opportunity. In your lifetime, you'll have a few of those moments, but I think a lot of our most defining moments are little tiny things that we grab hold on to, and then kind of take and go forward. So I really loved how Cullen described how he got interested in storytelling. And he's like, I made videos with my friends when I was a kid. We made Nerf videos and we messed around, and it was cool seeing the whole process, making a fun story with your friends and then seeing it come to fruition. How do you say that word? Fruition?
Fruition, yeah.
Fruition. Dang. All right.
I think most, pretty much anyone that's done anything usually has some kind of story like that, like any artist or, just anyone. It starts with the little things and it, becomes something bigger.
So I guess the whole theme of this little mini series within our podcast is kind of finding what you like, finding what you love. Sam and I are trying to progress in our understanding of what we want to do and what we want to spend the rest of our lives doing. So I think that's a huge takeaway for me, is that it's the small and simple things that can have a big impact when it comes to figuring out or answering questions like this.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of going with that, I think what really kind of stuck out to me is he was talking about how life is a story, and then if there's ever a point in the story where things aren't moving forward or keeps going on, there's kind of like a standstill, and nothing's kind of going on, nothing's moving forward, and because you don't know the next steps that you're going to be taking. And I kind of feel like in a way that kind of resonated with me, because while I'm not just complete, I won't say I'm doing nothing and I'm still trying to progress, but because I don't have that whole the whole outline of the story kind of all figured out, I almost kind of felt like that was kind of where I was kind of at. And I feel like that, I forget the exact wording he used, but I get really kind of if I just think of my life as a story, I need to find the next plot point that I want to get to. Yeah, the next beat. And then once you know where the next place you're going, then the story almost just kind of fills out itself, or it can. And just looking back, years in the future, to look back at it and say, okay, yeah, this is what I figured out I was going to do, and then filled out my story this way. I think that was just a really interesting and cool way to think about it all. And just kind of, it makes me rethink, it kind of frames what you want to do next kind of a bit better, or just in a more interesting way. I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Life is a story. And I kind of kept making the joke, in stories we watch in cinema or that we read, there's people like Cullen writing them. But in real life, we write our own story.
Yeah.
Yeah. We have control of our own story. And a lot of this goes back to whole take control of what you can and all that stuff. But, we are the authors of our own story, and we can really have such a we have the most influence on our story out of anyone else. It is our story, so we have the most influence. So I think that perspective helps me, or is inspiring me or helping me kind of see things in a different way. Not in a different way, but just kind of helps put what I've been thinking or what we've been trying to describe here in this podcast. It helps Cullen put it into words beautifully. Life really is a story, and we are the authors of our own story, and we have so much control over our own story. And we're going to have roadblocks. We're going to have problems. Just like Cullen said, it's a good story. To create a good story, you got to knock down the characters many times as you can, but then they still have to get to the end of the story. They have to fulfill the story. They have to complete the story. And if we might make a slight adjustment for the progression progress mindset that your story really never is finished, but it is true that you're going to have obstacles. You're going to have problems. You're going to have things you have to overcome. And what makes an interesting story, what makes a great story, and what I think makes a good life, and even I might even say a happy life, is not giving up, but rather overcoming those obstacles and progressing and continuing forward.
Yeah, it's like life is made up of a whole bunch of mini story arcs, and then combined, creates your whole and entire story. And going through each of those arcs and solving those problems and progressing continually just makes up the whole story, and it's a beautiful thing.
Exactly. Well, I guess we'll just leave it there. I'm trying my hardest not to be a broken record and say the same thing over and over again. So I think let's just leave it there.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Talk Progression. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast on wherever you like listening to podcasts. And don't forget to leave a review. Give us 5 stars. It really helps us a lot. And yeah, anything else?
Yeah, share it with a friend. We're trying to reach more people. It would be super helpful if you could share it with a friend. And also, we're always looking for feedback. We're always looking to progress our ability to share this content. So if there's any way you think we could improve, let us know. It won't hurt our feelings, but rather it'll make us happy that you told us and give us something to improve on. So thank you so much for listening. Like Sam said, follow us on our socials, and I hope you guys have a great day.
Bye.